Non-football news pertaining to the Washington Commanders come out all over the place Wednesday night and into Thursday during the day, but it does actually impact football, guys. So stick with us here. We're going to dissect all of it that happened on Thursday right now on Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, and we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and the WUSA 9 Plus app on your Roku or Amazon Fire Stick. And we thank you for making us your first listen or view of the day. I'm David Harrison, and my co-host sitting next to me or speaking next to me, if you're listening in on audio only, is Chris the Rooster Russell, both of us credential members of the media covering your Commanders. Chris is doing it for the Team 980, which he is still at work because of everything happening with this team right now. You can find he and Pete Medhurst live from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern over there anytime on the Odyssey app. That is Monday through Friday. And I am writing for Commander Country, part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation. And because all of our content is free, Chris, we cannot rip off our listeners.
That's well done. Well done. I like that. Oh boy, I don't know where to go with that. How about this? We're presented by LinkedIn Jobs. Helps you find LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Of course, we thank you for making us your first view and listen of the day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. All right. So as far as I know, we're not under investigation or having a consumer protection lawsuit filed against us. But you know who is, David? You might not know this by now. Dan Snyder and the Washington Commanders, Roger Goodell and the National Football League. That's because Attorney General for the District of Columbia, which I am in right now, Karl Racine, announced on Thursday afternoon that his office is indeed filing a consumer protection lawsuit. It's a little bit different than a regular standard civil lawsuit.
Yeah.
Maybe a matter of semantics. Against the Commanders, Dan Snyder, again, the NFL and Commissioner Roger Goodell. He said, with this lawsuit, we are standing up for D.C. residents who repeatedly lied to and deceived. That was just one thing that Karl Racine had to say over maybe about a half an hour, 35-minute or so press conference, including Q&A. David, I was kind of fascinated by his tone. He was clearly agitated at the behavior of Dan Snyder, the Commanders, and the National Football League. Your initial reaction, I know you were covering practice, so it's really unfair, but I mean, your initial reaction based on what you've heard, what you've seen, and what you've read.
Yeah, we had the press conference on through the WUSA 9 stream, YouTube stream in the media workroom. Everybody had their eyes glued to the television screen waiting for it to begin. And as it was almost beginning, Ron Rivera walked in for his post-practice press conference. So we turned it off because I don't think Coach Rivera would appreciate us all watching the press conference when we're supposed to be asking him questions. And of course, he got asked a lot of questions about that specifically and about a lot of things that we're going to cover here. But he also got asked about football. So that is important. And fortunately for us in this circumstance, we do have another full episode dropping Monday before the game kicks off on Monday night. So fortunately, we get to talk about this because it's very important for the future of the franchise, but we can also get to the football again, dropping on Monday. But my initial reaction to this whole thing, honestly, is at least it's something to hold Dan Snyder accountable, right? And with the news that, he's potentially selling, and there's still kind of counterpoints, and some people still think that he's just doing it to drum up revenue, and some people think it's a full sale, and obviously that'll all get worked out in the wash. But at long last, right, we've all basically been just wanting to say, look, either you can prove something that Dan Snyder and or the Washington Commanders organization did wrong for all this time, or you can't. And if you can't, I don't know what to tell you. Like, honestly, if you can't prove anything, then we're just chasing our tails at this point in time. If you can, then do it and do something so that this whole thing can be resolved and either Dan Snyder can be exiled out of the National Football League where so many people want him to go, or he can take his punishment and we can at least move forward. And that dark cloud that Ron Rivera's talked about and so many others can finally, hopefully dissipate. But as long as this just continues to linger, the storm over this franchise is just going to continue to linger. So at a minimum, even if it's not like this grand, indictment or anything like that, I'm happy that at least somebody is moving forward with some sort of proceeding to prove that wrongdoing was actually done. Because up to this point, it's all accusations.
One thing I would, though, point out, and I point this out to my radio partner, Pete Medhurst, all the time, who, like yourself, kind of wants some accountability and some action, right? And I understand that impatience, everybody's impatient at this point. We all want to find out what's going on. Is these things take an exhaustively long time to put together, check, write up. I mean, if you see some of the accusations, some, quite honestly, new stuff about a female chef that I had never heard of. These things take time to put together,
but Chris,
and to build a case.
I hate to cut you off, okay? But I've been covering this team for 18 months now.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been observing this team. That was a joke, by the way. I've been observing this team. I know I'm so short on this thing. Like you and the fans and like everybody, like you all have been dealing with this way longer than I have.
Right.
So but I think to your point, like if I'm impatient, I can only imagine what everybody else is going through. But you're right. It does take time and you want it done right. You know what I mean? And I think
absolutely.
that it's important everybody gets over the CSI syndrome, right? This doesn't take half an hour. So I think that's a very valid point that you're making.
Right. And so, and I appreciate your humor. It was actually pretty funny. But I do think this isn't the step that I think everybody was hoping for, but I think everybody was a little bit misguided. Oh, you hear Attorney General, you think Dan Snyder's going to be at a dais and getting carried out in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. No. That was never going to happen. But David, I do think this is one small step in the right direction for finally ridding the NFL, the DMV, this area of Dan Snyder. And this, again, may have been a tipping point leading to Dan deciding to explore all options. I also think, though, and here's the important thing, that this is probably the least thing he's got to worry about. Now, again, it could cost him a lot of money, a lawsuit, who knows? He's going to be deposed. Karl Racine made very sure, hey, this ain't going to be a deposition on a yacht. This is going to be in an uncomfortable office here in Washington, D.C. But also, don't forget, the Federal Trade Commission is involved in this. The Oversight Committee still has not come out with their report and their tongue lashing or scalding of Dan Snyder. Remember, they met with Dan Snyder for 11 hours under oath on that yacht that we haven't heard word one about. Are they going to level charges of perjury? I don't know. Then there's Mary Jo White and the second NFL investigation. Oh, and by the way, the federal investigation in the Eastern District of Virginia. Those all loom straight ahead, David. Again, this isn't about this action from Karl Racine, but this might just be the tip of the old iceberg.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that they're involving the NFL and Roger Goodell as well is important because that's kind of when things start. If you go back and you look at the timeline, that's when things all kind of started to accelerate a little bit, is when the news came out that Dan Snyder may have he's accused of not only ripping off fans, but also ripping off the NFL and other NFL owners. And that's when all of a sudden the tide starts shifting a little bit. And all of a sudden there's these rumors of owners wanting to vote to get him cast out, and only Jerry is backing him up and all these things. And you hate that it probably came to that. And that's what the optics look like. But what we know about the NFL is they're gonna protect it. They're gonna close house. And they're gonna protect themselves. Well, if the NFL gets dragged through the mud, if Roger Goodell gets dragged through the mud because of what Dan Snyder has done and what they've tried to do to help him maybe mitigate those public image damage, or the damage to his public image, then that's only going to further damage themselves and the other owners in turn, which makes this whole thing just a little bit more intense. And again, I think this, the writing's been on the wall, which is why we saw that sudden shift from Dan and Tanya to where all of a sudden now they're seeking out buyers.
Right. And they find themselves very strange bed partners, to say the least, at this point. The Commanders, the NFL, they all responded to Karl Racine's accusations and press conference. We will have the details and our thoughts on that next. But first, you might never want to work for Dan Snyder. I can't blame you. I did for 5 years, and I would never want to work for Dan Snyder again. But if you could hire someone yourself, you shouldn't gamble. Guys, this episode is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you're getting the right person, and it's not going to cost you a lot of time in order to do that. That's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the right person for your team faster and for free. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to post your job. Use the purple hashtag hiring frame on your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're open for business and you're hiring. You're going to get simple tools like screening questions that get you the right candidate at the right time so you know how to hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in developing and delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to and faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, thanks again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and view of the day. For your second listen today and view, check out Locked On Sports Today with Peter Bukowski and friends. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. It's Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, David, so statements on top of statements. It's like statement palooza, right? It's like your Christmas shopping list. It's never ending. First, the Commanders' lead attorney. I'm going to read it and then get your reaction because I was quite annoyed, if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. But John Brownlee, who has done a bunch of interviews and has said a bunch of things, and I guess you give him credit for doing some of that, but he's obviously a paid voice and legal counsel for the team. Him and his partner, Stuart Nash, issued a statement saying, quote, over 2 years ago, Dan and Tanya Snyder acknowledged that an unacceptable workplace culture had existed within their organization for several years, and they've apologized many times for allowing that to happen. We agree with Attorney General Racine on one thing: the public needs to know the truth. Although the lawsuit repeats a lot of innuendo, half-truths, and lies in capital letters, we welcome this opportunity to defend the organization for the first time in a court of law and to establish once and for all what is fact and what is fiction. David, before I give you get your reaction, I mean, this is the kind of statement that, I don't know, it sounds a whole lot similar to what came out in the Brian Robinson Attorney General criticism statement on Wednesday that then team president Jason Wright had to walk back and say, whoa, because the Commanders and whoever issued the statement were getting absolutely destroyed. Brownlee's name wasn't attached to that, but Jason made a reference to external counsel, and it sounds very similar in tone and nature. This annoyed me just like the Wednesday statement did. Did it bother you?
Yeah. I mean, on so many different levels. I mean, this is something that I taught my children when they were young people in this world, is that when you apologize for something you got caught for, you don't then get credit for the apology. And that's the thing with this whole organizational shift is they want credit. And I'm not talking about like Ron and Jason. I'm talking about Dan and Tanya's side. Like, you want credit for apologizing for something you created only after getting caught that you had created it. And in the first place, like, this is like getting caught in the bank vault with the alarm going off and then saying, oh man, we didn't mean to be here, officer, please don't take us to jail. And then to sit here and act and then try to spin it to where like you're the victim, like you're the little bullied Dan Snyder, owner of the Washington NFL franchise, bullied by the National Football League and Congress and all these other people, and that you're appreciative of your chance to defend yourself. No, you've had many opportunities to defend yourself. In fact, you're the main reason why so much of the initial investigation can't even be exposed to the public. And you've had multiple opportunities. The NFL even threw you under the bus and said, as long as the Washington Commanders allow it to be made public, we'll allow it to be made public. And you didn't do it. Not only that, but you tucked your tail and you hit on your yacht and couldn't even face Congress in an open setting. I mean, I would say it's tone deaf, but it's not tone deaf at this point in time. Like, they've been told what the tone of the investigation is and what all this stuff. It's just flat out rude and arrogant, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I mean, it reeks of still not getting it. You say it's not necessarily tone deaf. Maybe I agree with you, but it's still not getting the understanding that don't fight fire with fire through the media and through statements. Also, you want to defend the team, fine, that's your right. Defend the team, defend it in court. You're saying you're looking forward to telling the truth, well, then tell the truth in court. Prove that you're telling the truth, and that there is nothing else out there that we're going to find under under a trap door somewhere.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how much of this is legalese versus how much of it is an aggressive PR strategy of trying to fight back and fight fire with fire. And sometimes, David, you're just better off, and take it from a guy who, has fought with fans because they didn't see things the way I thought they should see things. I've had to learn my lessons, and sometimes I still have to remind myself it's not always good to, again, fight a war on so many fronts. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but you know what? I get paid to talk. I get paid to comment. I get paid to opinionize. They don't. They get paid, to defend and represent their clients, but don't wage a war through the media, and don't make yourself look bad, and don't cause a rift potentially in the locker room either, because that's what the Wednesday statement ultimately did.
Yeah, I mean, none of this looks good. Like, honestly, even if Dan called him and said, "You better make a statement," like, come up with something. Like, dude, change the tune. This whole shtick of we've admitted and we've apologized and we've done this and we've done that, and look at all the minorities we hired and look at all the women that are happy now. Like, we got it, dude. But that doesn't make you a victim or make you absolved from having to answer for your previous actions. Like, can people change? Yeah, absolutely. But before you can change, and before you can expect society to accept your changes, you have to atone and accept responsibility for what you did. And just because you're a billionaire doesn't make you exempt from that.
Absolutely. The NFL also added a statement saying, quote, "The independent investigation into workplace misconduct at the Washington Commanders was thoroughly and comprehensively conducted by Beth Wilkinson and her law firm. Following a completion of the investigation, the NFL made a public summary of Ms. Wilkinson's findings and imposed a record-setting fine against the club and its ownership." Then they said, "We reject the legally unsound and factually baseless allegations made today by the D.C. Attorney General against the NFL and Commissioner Goodell, and will vigorously defend against those claims." So the NFL is saying, David, that they're not happy with Attorney General Racine. I didn't think they would be happy, because now they're lumped in with Dan Snyder and the Commanders. And notice, and maybe this is by design, maybe this is just something that my suspicious mind picked up. They're not saying, hey, we reject the legally unsound and factually baseless allegations made against the Commanders, Dan Snyder, and the NFL and Commissioner Goodell. They're just like, forget about Dan, forget about the Commanders. They're saying, we're going to defend the NFL and Commissioner Goodell.
Yeah, basically they're going to come into this as a, look, we got duped too. Like, we were tricked as well as you guys were tricked. We didn't know, and it'll be up to Dan. And I mean, that's where the backdoor politics of this whole thing come in. Like, is Dan going to go scorched earth and unveil, like, when he's caught with his hand in the cookie jar, is he then going to unveil the rest of the hands that were in the cookie jar? And that's something that we can't really predict. But I think that's really what this boils down to is, did the NFL, and by that I mean we mean Roger Goodell, do anything to try to help Dan Snyder and the Commanders sweep some of this under the rug? Probably. I can't say yes definitively, but probably, just because that's the record that we've seen with the National Football League. Is it going to come out? That's really the question. Is it going to come out? Because that's basically the defense is going to be here is look, we're not, we don't live in Washington. We don't work in his organization. We were told things and we were provided documents that led us to think one thing, and obviously we were duped as well. It's a defense of ignorance is what it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, unfortunately, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. This is kind of the tip of the iceberg kind of thing. And we're just going to have to deal with this and talk about football as well. Speaking of football.
Yeah, we'll talk about that impact on the game potentially and the players here in a moment, as the Washington Commanders try to secure themselves another victory, this time within the division. And if you've thought about securing your home with a home security system, but you've been putting it off, you're going to need to listen to what we have to tell you right now, because right now, Locked On Commanders listeners, you can get the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you're not going to want to miss it. They actually have on-call 24/7 people monitoring your systems, monitoring your alarms and your sensors, And if they sense a problem, they will dispatch emergency services, whether they can get a hold of you or not. It's that great. And if you're away, you can have it at the touch of your hands on your cell phone. High definition cameras you can access 24/7. One of the most fun features, at least for me, you can speak through. They have a speaker. You can literally push a button. So if you see someone trying to steal your Amazon packages or what have you, you can tell them, hey, knock it off. You're on camera thanks to Simply Safe. So don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system that I recommend because I have it here in my house. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl. This is, again, their biggest discount of the year. So don't wait. That's Simply Safe with an I, SIMPLI, simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Talking about football here on the Locked On Commanders podcast. I know it's amazing. We're actually going to talk about football, but unfortunately it still has to do, Chris, with this whole thing because it is impacting the locker room. Look, Ron Rivera, the head coach of the Washington Commanders, has long been saying that he wants to focus on football, focus on the game, focus on the field, because that's what they can control. That's what the players can control. It's what he as a coach can control. He can't control any of this other stuff. And I get it. And he was asked on Thursday, I believe it was John Keim of ESPN said, okay, how frustrating is it that your players, because we're about to do open locker room, how frustrating is that your players are about to get asked about this kind of stuff. He said, well, you guys can do us a favor and not ask about it. And I get what Ron is saying, you know what I mean? But it's our jobs, right? And it's John's job and everybody else's job to cover this organization from a holistic standpoint. I know that not everybody cares about this kind of stuff, but there's a lot of people that want to see this thing come to a finish, and these are the steps to get there. One of those people is Benjamin St-Juste, Chris. And Benjamin St-Juste recently, and this was before, I want to make sure this is clear. This was before the AG statement. This was before the releases that came out Wednesday and the announcements and all that stuff. This was about 5 or 6 days ago now by the time you're listening to this. Benjamin St-Juste did an interview with a French written newspaper publication, and he talked about how ever since he's been with the team, there's just been this dark cloud. There's been this kind of feeling around it, and that he believes that for the fans and for the team, that they need a fresh start. Now, he didn't come out and say Dan Snyder needs to sell the team or anything like that, but that's the basic gist of what he's saying. And it just kind of shows you that, yes, the players are obviously aware, right? But it's also on their mind. I think that's what's important. Is that also shows that it's on their mind. And I applaud Ron Rivera and the other coach for trying to mitigate that as much as possible. But in today's world of everybody's connected to everything, you can only do so much. Now, did it directly lead to wins or losses? That's something that we can't necessarily talk about. But Chris, Brian Robinson was sucked. Like Ron Rivera is literally saying, I'm trying to keep it out of the locker room. And Brian Robinson's name was literally sucked right into the middle of this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And listen, you heard a bunch of his teammates come out and express, I know Charles Leno and others, dismay, frustration that the team or somebody for the team, again, Jason Wright referred to it as external counsel's frustration with the Attorney General's office, but whatever. John Brownlee did not use his name in that statement. It said it came from a commander statement. So somebody released it somehow, some way. And now all of a sudden, Brian Robinson, like you said, is thrust into the mix. And he's having a hard enough time just figuring out, hey, how to be a rookie in the NFL after having been shot twice and losing 6 weeks of practice and games and so on and so forth from the time it happened till the time he was actually able to practice. And, Benjamin St-Juste is right now. Listen, I mean, he grew up in Montreal. He knows from the Montreal Canadiens, right, that there's always a lot of juice and drama and whatever and chaos. But I don't know if anything could prepare anybody for this. And that's the problem. When it seeps into the locker room, you start wondering, like, when can I get out of here? Why should I put my body on the line for this circus? And even if you love your teammates, and even if you love Ron, and even if you are a professional, it gets really hard, David, to constantly go through the grind, if you will, of all of this. So, ultimately, I do think it will have some sort of an impact. I don't know exactly what. Listen, if they lose by 12, 13, 14 points on Monday night, and right now on Bet Online, the last time I checked, I believe it was Thursday afternoon, it was like 11 was the spread. I think it was all the way up to 11. If they lose by more than the spread, does that mean that it affected them? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that, but how could it not? They're human beings. It affects everyone. It affects us. It affects our audience. It affects everyone. And you have to kind of then wonder, okay, were they mentally and emotionally prepared to do everything that they have to do to win this football game against the undefeated Eagles?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to quantify, right? It's hard to kind of pinpoint and say, Taylor Heineke hits that slant if Dan Snyder's nothing. Like, you can't do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But is it having an effect? It obviously is. It's just one of those things that you want to be proud of your organization, right? And you go back to the name change, and there were members of the organization historically who came out and said, like, I'm not a Commander, I'm a Redskin. I'm not going to come do this. I'm not going to go do these things. Well, that shows a certain amount of pride in what they were and what they were doing. Players in the NFL, even though they're pros and they're paid and you can call them mercenaries what you want, they want to be proud about the logo they wear. They want to be proud about the team that's going to be attached to their name for the rest of their lives. And they don't want to be embarrassed by this.
Just one final note to wrap things up. An injury report from Thursday. Now, for fans not exactly up to like NFL protocol, because it's a Monday night game, the injury report goes Thursday, Friday, Saturday as well. The full practices for this week. Team just had a light walkthrough on Wednesday. No official injury report. But the one on Thursday saw, once again, Cole Holcomb out, and J.D. McKissick, who's got a neck issue. He missed last week. Probably going to miss some time here, it looks like. I haven't put him on IR yet, but Cole Holcomb and J.D. McKissick, Holcomb's missed the last 2 games. They both did not practice. But I guess a little bit of optimism. Jahan Dotson, Tyler Larson, and David Mayo were all limited on Thursday. So if you look at Dotson right now, we've been here before. He did practice a couple of weeks ago after he missed the initial first 2 games, and then he re-aggravated it again, and that set him back another couple of weeks. So hold your breath time that they have Jahan Dotson in the lineup.
Yeah, he looked good on Thursday too, so hopefully that's gonna stick.
We are going to have our game preview episode all leading up to Monday Night Football. Just stay with us. We will actually get to talk football, we hope. Thanks again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and view of the day. Now make your second listen and view the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock, former NFL scout Matt Williamson, giving you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hop in, guys, it's 301-615-3577. That's 301-615-3577 on the voicemail. For David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders, for SI.com's FanNation and Commander Country, I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app. If you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, and thank you for joining us right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.